No sweat. So thanks everyone. Can everyone hear me? I can't tell if this is on.
No. Speak into the top of it. The last thing
how's that?
Barely hear. Much better.
Good. Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is exciting for me because usually I talk to lawyers, and so it's nice to be around non-lawyers, frankly. My name is Sara Cable. I'm Director of Data Privacy and Security with the Massachusetts Attorney General's Office. Just I think a disclaimer, we always have to do this as government employees. These are my views and not the views of the Attorney General or of her office. So just my personal views as sort of someone in the trenches, as it were, who works almost exclusively on data security and data privacy issues. So I'll share my perspective as how we as privacy regulators look at this issue. And first, I always find it's helpful for people because I don't know if they really understand what the Attorney General's office does. The Attorney General, Maura Healey, elected official, is the chief law enforcer for the Commonwealth. And so we are in charge of all the district attorneys, essentially. We enforce criminal law, we enforce civil law, and the division that I hang out in is the Consumer Protection Division. So we have civil authority. We basically go after fraudsters, scammers, con artists, legitimate companies who engage in quote-unquote unfair or deceptive trade practices. Sort of within that is where we do a lot of our data privacy and security work. Historically, the work that we have done has been around cybersecurity issues, data breach issues. There's laws in Massachusetts that require companies, as in exchange for the privilege of having all of your information, the companies have to secure it from anticipated risks and threats. And then when the data is breached or compromised, which inevitably it is, they have to notify you and the state about that. And that work is just ongoing and constant. You can't pick up a paper without reading about some new data breach. But another area that is related but slightly different is the area of data privacy. And I think this is really, we're talking about algorithmic discrimination today, but I think data privacy is really sort of a predicate to all of this, because none of these algorithms or big data or any of this happens unless a consumer's privacy is eroded in some way, right? This entire thing is fueled by vast quantities of consumer data that is collected from consumers, often without really their knowledge. Maybe you consented as evidenced by some long terms of service on your teeny tiny little mobile screen that you never read. But for the fact of the matter is that we are all leaving little trails of data exhaust every time we go on the internet, on our phone or whatnot. And that's getting all swept up and used, sometimes in really beneficial, transformative ways, but sometimes in ways that are not so great, and that's what we're talking about today. So I just want to briefly, I know it's late, there's other speakers, but just share a little bit how we as civil law enforcement view these issues. And I think as a privacy regulator, I think there's really sort of three characteristics about, I call it big data, but I think you all know what that means. Three things that are concerning. Number one, I already alluded to this. The whole idea of big data relies on, I call it an erosion of consumer privacy. I think we, for better or worse, realized that we can't wander through the world anonymously anymore. We've lost control over our data. Maybe that's good, maybe it's not. Hard to say, because I don't have any insight into how much my data is worth. And I think that's troubling, because consumers are promised all of these transformative benefits. How do you measure that when you don't realize how the data might be being used against you? And when you have these algorithms that are proprietary and secret, you're never going to know about it. They're making decisions about you, and you may not even realize that they're making those decisions. So, when I think about how we might address these issues, we tend to think about discrimination in terms of, race, national origin, sex, the sort of protected characteristics that the law has decided matter. And then we think about them in certain contexts: credit decisions, insurance decisions, housing, employment. These are areas that the law has decided that discrimination is unlawful and someone can be held accountable. But when you for example, I'm not going to pick on this company because I actually have no idea, but Rocket Mortgage, I've been seeing a lot of commercials for Rocket Mortgage. Like, you can skip the underwriting, you can get a mortgage in 2 minutes. Well, how are they doing that? Well, they're doing that because you're giving them some little bit of information that they can use to sort of dive into a bigger dossier of information about you that some huge data broker has collected about you. You have no idea what that is. And in fact, the company probably isn't even seeing the data, they're seeing a score. You're a good candidate for mortgage or you're a bad candidate for a mortgage. What does that score mean? No one's ever going to know. And as we heard, what's the data that it's relying on? What is the predictive modeling based on? How good is it? Does anyone even really know? And all you know is that you spit your information into a cool, fancy-looking mobile app, and all of a sudden, hey, you got a mortgage, and it was for $400,000. And maybe if you had gone to the credit union, you would have gotten a mortgage for $500,000 under better terms. You're never going to know. So I think we're taking all of this stuff at face value, but I think there's some really concerning stuff happening behind the scenes, and this is where the issue of transparency is really important. And we think it's great to get a mortgage in 2 minutes, but is it worth the price that we're paying, which is maybe if you spent 2 days or even 2 weeks, you might get an even better mortgage, and like that thing's going to hang around for 30 years. So maybe you don't want to rush this, So I think the idea that consumers have to give up a significant amount of privacy and control over the information is concerning to us. Another related issue: the data can be wildly inaccurate. Credit reports, consumer reports, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. Those are highly regulated companies. There's the federal law, Fair Credit Reporting Act, and there's state law that sort of accompanies it. And the information in there is supposed to be accurate, and you have a right to see it. You probably requested your credit report every once in a while. You have a right to dispute inaccurate information. There's all kinds of things they need to do to try to, I think, ensure the maximum possible accuracy. Those things are rife with errors. I mean, this is a highly regulated, sophisticated international companies, and they can't even get it right. And so what about these other scores or other reports on you that aren't covered by this law? That's not going to be, come on. Of course those have inaccuracies in them. But unlike what the the Fair Credit Reporting Act allows you to do, you can't get a free report. You can't see what data they have on you. You don't have a chance to correct it. And so this is really concerning because we all have a digital doppelganger out there. And how closely am I to my digital doppelganger? I have no idea, but it's a digital doppelganger that companies are using to make some pretty important decisions about my life and for all of us. And so when you have algorithms that might have baked in discriminatory echoes or effects in them, you can see how it can very quickly reflect and then rapidly exacerbate existing prejudices and discriminatory impacts. So that's obviously very concerning to us. And that's the last point, is that big data can discriminate, which is what we're talking about today. I think the challenge I'm a litigator. The challenge from my perspective is, how do you prove this? And I mean, this is a question I'd put to everyone. At some point, if you want to hold a company accountable, asking them to stop nicely only works so far. At some point, you got to sue them. And when you sue them, at some point, some decision maker, usually a judge, is going to say, well, what's your evidence? And anti-discrimination law has a very sort of tried and true method of winnowing out, because no one ever says I'm discriminating on the basis of race, right? Like maybe back in the 60s they did, but no one's going to say that now. They're going to say, we're not discriminating on the basis of race. Look, we use all this, we use zip code, we use all this other stuff. And then as the plaintiff, you have to say, well, zip code is a proxy for race, because most people who live in, Dorchester are, you look at census data, you can see most of them are of color, you can show that, well, you're not saying race, but you're using zip code, it's the same thing. Or you can say, fine, your intentions are beautiful, you have a heart of gold about this, but the fact of the matter is, your algorithm is causing certain people of a certain race harm that it is not being visited on otherwise similar people not of color, and that's a problem. And the law doesn't allow that, but you have to prove it. And I think when you get to algorithms and sort of algorithms, especially when they're getting closer and closer to being able to make individualized decisions, how do you prove that certain classes of people are being discriminated against? Both sort of practically, the sort of statistics of that and getting all of the confounding variables out and trying to find a similarly situated group of people of a certain characteristic versus another similarly situated group of another characteristic, just finding those people is hard. But then at some point you wonder, is a company going to say, we're not discriminating. This is like the golden holy grail of anti-discrimination. We're making an individualized decision about this person. This person, we don't care what race they are. This person is more risk averse, for whatever. How do you answer that using anti-discrimination law? I mean, it's a little bit of a theoretical question, but you wonder, is this where this is going? Does anti-discrimination law cease to have any meaning in this context? And then what do you do? So these are the kinds of things that we sort of ponder about. And I have a few points and some questions for you guys that maybe we'll discuss during the panel. I think state government has its limitations, but it also has some really cool powers to it. And I think in this state is sort of well positioned. We have a very strong consumer protection law. We have some strong data privacy law. We have a very progressive attorney general right now. And so this state, I think, is well positioned to, as what we're doing now, pay very close attention to this and be on guard. And to advance the right cases at the right time to try to draw attention to this issue. But the transparency issue, I think, is a very complicated issue for us to get around, and getting into these black boxes of algorithms are sneaky. And so, a question, is there a way to use big data to disentangle what big data is doing? There's got to be a way to use the sort of, power of these algorithms to be able to piece out, this algorithm is having disparate impacts on some populations. Here's a widget that we can get 1,000 people in the Boston area to put on their internet browser, and we can have people sort of go to the same website and see if they're seeing the same things. If the kid in Dorchester searches for college, are they going to see the same thing as a kid in Newton searching for college, right? Or are they going to see a for-profit predatory school versus Harvard? I don't know, but man, it'd be awfully cool to see that. So if someone can figure that out, honestly, if someone can figure that out, because I suspect, and I think it's not surprising, people's internet experiences are very different depending on who they are, what computers they're using, and where they're searching from, and the past search histories and maybe social media activity that they've done. And like I said, I think we all know it's happening, but proving it in a court of law is a tough nut to crack. And so maybe there's a way to use big data to run some sort of big meta-analysis on that. And then, how do you get culture change in the tech industry? Big data is disruptive, awesome, disruptive, fantastic, that's cool. And there's a lot of cool things you can do with it. There's no question that benefit consumers. But that doesn't mean you disrupt these long-held, legally enshrined notions of anti-discrimination law. You don't disrupt the people element of this. Just because, I think I'll leave you guys with a story. You may have heard about Amazon's same-day delivery.
Yeah.
I don't know if everyone's heard about this, but I mean, this just sort of, Amazon, I think it was Bloomberg did a report, I'm going to get the facts wrong, but it was like Amazon rolled out same-day delivery for Amazon Prime members. And you pay $99, you get Amazon Prime. If you lived in, they rolled it out in like 20 metropolitan areas, Seattle, Boston, LA, New York, all of the expected places. But not in every single zip code, just in certain zip codes. And they determined where they were going to roll it out based on, they ran the numbers. And it probably wasn't a very sophisticated algorithm, but they relied on past shopping behavior of the Prime members in that community and sort of used that to predict, is this going to be a good bang for our buck? Because this is awfully expensive to deliver products same day. We need to figure out if this is going to work and where, and so that we can iron out the kinks in these test markets and then roll it out. And I think it was Bloomberg, it's amazing if you look at the maps, but like in every metropolitan area, there was like 1 or 2 or 3 zip codes that they didn't roll it out to. And in Boston, it was a donut. And in the middle of the donut, Foxbury, Dorchester, and probably some others. And what was funny was, we looked at this and we said, well, that's bad. Like, how could they not, you don't need an algorithm to sort of look at that and say, that looks bad. Especially when, this is my map, here's Boston. I want to say their warehouse was either up in Everett or down in Canton or somewhere. But there was no, you couldn't explain it by distance, because if the warehouse was up here, you know, down here they were getting service, but up here they weren't, and then here they were getting service, you know. And so what you had is you had Amazon Prime customers in Dorchester subsidizing the same-day delivery for folks in Newton. Mm-hmm. Right? Same price, disparate, like, that's not good. And, you know, we called Amazon, as I'm sure a lot of other attorney generals did, and we said, hey guys, this looks really bad. And they said, yeah, we know, we fixed it. Sorry, you know, because public pressure is really effective. But they weren't at all apologetic. They said, this is what the data showed us we were going to do. How do you argue? This is what I was going to do. And, you know, if you're a for-profit entity, sure, okay, I guess. But I said, you know, it's really weird, because what you're saying is that you want to roll it out to your best-paying customers and the customers who are going to, like, give you a profit. But, like, there's no better way to ensure that people who aren't good customers are going to continue to be bad customers. You're treating them badly. Like, don't you want to expand your market? Don't you want more customers? Shouldn't you be rolling out the same service to everyone? Like, what? And this just, like, went right over their heads. So I think there's some education about implied biases in algorithms, because, not surprisingly, I think algorithms just reflect the biases of the people making them. So these are the things that you know, give us pause, and we are, I'd say, on guard about these issues, and you know, using consumer protection law, whether it's a state enforcer or as a class action litigant, is one way to, I think, bring these issues to light and stop them. So, thank you.